title here, actually, I've got to give credit to Gaetan Peltier. He emailed, I think, in, I don't know, the spring and asked if I'd be willing to talk. And a couple weeks later, I saw an agenda and it had this title beside it. So, you know, it's very topical, very important subject matter. So I stuck with his title. So thanks, Gaetan. I'll try to fulfill what you were thinking about here. I'll start with, it says, future of forest management. I'll start with future timber supply, and I'll just preface with, I'm going to talk largely about timber today. I'm not going to talk much about conservation or forest health. Those important items certainly fit in this conversation. I think you'll see where they fit, but I'm going to focus on timber supply, just given the time that we've got here. That's really what I'm going to focus on. So I just wanted to start with that. So this graph, the green bars here are, we'll call it the future wood supply. And you'll notice that the x-axis there doesn't have values on it. I'll say why in a minute, but you know, if you think about that as percent of harvest, or in fact, you could actually look at that as absolute volume. That's the harvest from what we refer to typically as our managed stands, so pre-commercial thinning and planted land base. So that's not just softwood, there'd be hardwood in that forest too. Now I didn't label, or I didn't put values there on the x-axis just because that's a bit strategy dependent and there's some bounds on the numbers, and we just thought we'd talk about this as a schematic to show really three things, okay? First thing is that the volume from this land base grows pretty quickly. If you look at the now on the y-axis, and over the next 30 years there along the bottom, it grows in the next period, almost doubles the volume here, or the proportion of the harvest. That's a pretty rapid shift. The second thing to take away from this is that it continues to grow over the next 3 periods by, again, quite a step every 5-year period. The third thing to take away is that once it gets to sort of a peak there, and this is probably obvious to some, but it sticks around. It's there. It's a new part of the wood supply, and it's a pretty significant portion of the wood supply, and it becomes almost a new normal. Okay, so that's something that we're thinking a lot about, and the people from ERD here are probably sick of hearing me talk about this graph, but it's something that we're giving a lot of thought to. And what I'm going to talk through as we go through this slide presentation is how does the rest of the forest fit around this? This is a significant portion, but how does this play into the rest of our wood supply and the rest of our forest management? I guess the takeaway here is that, you know, whether if you're a forest tech working in the woods through layout, or you're a trucker, or you're working on machinery in the woods, you're gonna feel this, right? It's gonna hit you, and you may see it depending on what you do as a benefit, reduce cost, or it does something that makes your job better or easier. It may be that it hits you in a way that doesn't feel so great, right? It's an increased cost or otherwise. But that's the picture. The questions that we're asking at a sort of strategic, tactical, operational level is what we'll go through here tonight. But the way that adaptation and precision either helps us ask those questions or answers them, I think is important. That's why I keep telling you a pretty good subject matter here. Okay, so that's the picture. Now we'll go into a couple of items to expand on that. So talk quickly about precision and adaptation, just to kind of give us a base. We're all talking from the same thing. Nothing really new there. Excuse me. Then I'll talk a bit to the strategic and tactical and operational questions that we're asking around that forest that I just showed and other parts of our forest, and then just talk a little bit about moving forward. So on precision. So precision forestry, nothing new here. I think most people know more about this than I do, but use of technology to improve management outcomes or reduce costs. At least that's the way that I would think about precision forestry. Now there's lots here. This is developing, it's moving fast. I think there's a lot of companies in Nouveau-Brunswick that are really getting ahead here. I'll speak to a couple of points. excuse me, so increased granularity of management, what does that mean? So I think this provides an opportunity or precision forestry, the way it's being used in some cases brings knowledge down to sort of a different level, right? From thinking about things very high level right down to more stand level information or tree level information. So I think a great example is some of the work that Sean Ram did, sort of sub-stand commercial thinning operability on the Blackthorn land base using Rhino. And so that's a level of granularity that we haven't done, I think, in the past without quite a bit of groundwork. Okay, so strict control of variability in operations, that controlling cost, right? So variability, take cost out, try to control that. I mean, the information, I was talking to the Ponzi guys about the information that we have in every tree that we cut, where we have the single grip harvester heads that are providing us so much information to be used for our utilization and understanding piece size and those kinds of things. Automation, I know FP Innovation is doing a lot of work with automated trucking, automated loading. Don't know how much that's here. There's some nursery work in automation, but this is likely to come as well. Optimized decision making. I mean, in the province we've got a long history with optimization and data, but the things. I was in a meeting with Adam Dick a few weeks ago about AI and artificial intelligence and all this big data and some of the statistics some of the guys talk about. I've never, didn't hear that information before. So optimized decision making, tablets, handhelds, that's all here for the most part, and lots of opportunity there. Why? Well, cost is increasingly important. And wood costs are increasingly important. Trade issues, we've got carbon and other things that are driving costs up, low-grade markets, all the things that we all think about. Cost is increasingly important. The question becomes, how can precision forestry help reduce costs? Labor is increasingly challenged. Obviously, I think everyone here knows the difficulties in getting labor, in machines, in silviculture. So how can precision forestry help us out there? The environmental factors playing an increasing role. I think there's a session this afternoon on climate change, matching species to site, autecology, all the things that we can do with precision forestry that we couldn't do before. And then the social expectations are increasing. So how can we use precision forestry to gain public trust? I'm not going to hit on these things as I go through the presentation in full. So I'll leave it to you to take this and think about it when we go through the forest and the forest types that I'm going to talk about and how this stuff can be applied in these different types. The trick here is, as I laid out the slide, how do you measure the return on the investment there, right? I mean, in some cases it's relatively easy. An increase in productive machine hours, the harvesting that you do annually, you can measure the return on investment relatively quickly in some cases. In other cases, it's much more difficult. It's an improvement in environmental performance. These things are a little bit more difficult to measure, but I think it's important because there's a lot of opportunity on that end. On adaptive management, I mean, like when we talk about adaptive management, I think the way that it's typically talked about is changing your management in addressing some pressure to that management. I mean, we talked before about the increase in conservation areas through time, right? That would be changing to new information, changing to interest, increased conservation. It's changing your direction, changing your management. And I think that's when we talk about adaptive management. It's often the way that we talk about it. We replan every 5 years. Objectives may change, but that's not really, I think, the way that it was originally talked about in the early '80s with Baskerville and Buzz Holling. It was more about learning, right? And rather than changing the decisions every few years to outside pressures, it was more about, how did the outcomes change given the pressures that were put on them? So we made a decision, we thought something was going to happen. Why did it not happen, or why did it happen? And trying to learn from the things that we did. Those two things are very different, and I think the second thing is going to become much more important as we move forward. Climate change, this forest, and it's not just the biology here, it's economics and all the parts of our management. So special emphasis on uncertainty. iterative learning to reduce uncertainty, and then improve management as a result of learning. That's really, I think, is the idea here. And this kind of thing, I think, as I said, will become important. Adaptive silviculture should treat learning as an objective explicitly. And then precision forestry, to make the connection here, could speed the learning. And so how do we explicitly define the uncertainty and what we want to learn, and then use precision forestry to speed that learning? So I think that's going to be important. So as I said, take those things with you here as we go. I'm not going to come back to these things, but I think they're important on the next slides, okay? Okay, so what I've tried to do here, a lot on this slide, but what I've tried to do is just describe our forest and the crown forest in terms of species composition and broad types. You've got hardwood, mixedwood, and softwood. The colors don't show up in grade here, but you can see that there's a depth there. Hardwood, mixedwood, softwood in the back. I've got just age is difficult, but broad ages will give you an idea about the age class structure of the forest, and then area, okay? That's, I've said crown forest all, right? So that's the entire 3 million hectares of crown forest. It becomes more important in a moment. But really, I mean, there's a couple observations there. You see that there's really sort of a young forest and an old forest, right? You kind of get this two age structure across our forest. That's important, I think. It's more important when you look at it. I'm just going to go back and forth a bit here. So the second slide here is the working forest, or what we refer to, I think, typically as the general forest, the forest where we produce timber. You can see that the old forest really has gone away there, right? So I'm going to focus on speaking about and working through this slide. It's a relatively younger forest. But what I'd like to do is just hit 4 or 5 places in that graph and talk through that stand age class type and what we think the strategic, operational, tactical type of questions are. Okay, so that's where we'll go from here. So the first one is this sort of immature, younger hardwood, right? So we've got, consider it, depending on where you draw the lines here in the species composition, the 25 to 40-year-old type stands. There's about 150,000 hectares, 7% of the working forest. So pretty significant amount of area. It's not something, or it's not an area that we really have done much with in the past. Right? It's sat there until it's become operable, 65, 60, and then it gets treated. What can we be doing in this forest at a younger age? I mean, there's lots of conversations going on. AB's doing some work on their Crown License 8 and on their freehold. Donnie Crow, I was talking to him. I think there's some other work going on around the province in this younger age hardwood. So the questions are, what quality or piece size improvement opportunities exist? And what is the growth response, and what's the quality response? Not something we've done a lot of in the past. We don't have the plots to tell us how these stands respond. But that's a big strategic question when you think about the forest that we're leaving, the mature natural forest, into this younger forest, right? So if we want to maintain piece size, same question on softwood. Want to maintain piece size, is there an opportunity in this forest to do it, to get it relatively young? So how do we ensure optimal timing so that we get the response we want? What are the financial, who pays? Are the expertise even available to do the job? So important questions. If we don't look into this kind of thing, we just have a self-fulfilling prophecy. We just stay out of those stands and we don't do it. But I think it's important, and NHRI is providing information on this, on how to work our way through this. I think in the past also we've tried to focus on really high quality TH stands, sugar maple, yellow birch. Should we be getting in that 150,000 hectares is a lot of area there, that range in quality. So is there opportunity to get into lower quality stands? And how do those questions get answered in those cases? So moving on, back at the sort of older age classes in the mixed wood condition. So we call it sort of mature mixed wood. All right, 50 plus years old, it's mature if you want to think about it from a timber supply perspective. About 200,000 hectares, again, depending on exactly where you draw the line, 9% of the forest. I think the big thing to ask ourselves here is, what are our regeneration objectives in this forest? Are we trying to control the future forest or the species composition of that forest in a way that's, we're writing it down, we're thinking about it, and here's what we're gonna do. Here's the right way to harvest it at the right season with the right equipment so that we regenerate spruce because we're coming back in 15 years. Whatever the regime is, there isn't enough silviculture money to go around and treat our young forest, right? So I think we gotta be thinking in this mixed-wood forest, really what are we trying to do there? And then once we decide that, how do you operationalize that? Because we're not operationalizing that today, I don't think. So how do we get all the right information in the right person's hands so all those decisions are made at the right time? That's a precision forestry question. I'll bring that up. Okay, so again on the sort of mature side, mature hardwood. So 50-plus-year-old, again, sort of what we would typically think about merchantable. 300,000 hectares, about 15% or so of the working forest. I think a lot of the questions that we would ask are getting worked through NHRI, and the collaboration, cooperation, I think's really been phenomenal here. But I mean, at a strategic level, we're thinking about how do we increase the abundance of sugar maple. We're thinking about, again, how do we maintain or grow pea size in this forest, maintain a certain pea size of hardwood. And again, I think the way that the NHRI system is designed in terms of laying out an objective, right, and setting out parameters to meet that objective really gives us the opportunity to go back and say, okay, well, did we get what we wanted there? It is running us towards that management. The other thing that I was talking about this earlier with this is how do we balance regeneration in this forest versus maintaining a canopy and managing a canopy? So if we were talking about earlier, if you took this hardwood forest out and sat it down and said, well, I want to maintain a certain species abundance and certain quality through time, you may do things a bit differently if you were managing the stand sort of one-off. Something to think about there. Okay, so young forest, I think I sort of touched on this, but 0 to 20 years old, 350,000 hectares, or about 16% of our working forest. Again, what are we trying to do with that? I mean, there's not enough silviculture money to go around. I think there's some interesting things going on, crop tree release and some mechanized PCT. With labor and money, how do we control composition and growth objectives on a broader land? There might be some opportunities there. How do we balance what we want to do in that future forest, or that young forest, with social concerns? And then how do we overcome these labor and cost challenges? The big one here, and this is the one to really talk about, and this will spend a little bit of time here, is immature softwood. That's the biggest bar there, and that's in the 20 to 40 sort of age class. Same again with 40 and 60-year-old. There's quite a bit of area there as well. So 20 to 40-year-old, 625,000 hectares, about 29% of the working forest. Okay, a very important piece of the future wood supply, very important to our sawmill sector. Before I go into the rest of that, I took our silviculture statistics and just put age to the treatments. So what you'll see here is this is our, again, what I talked about earlier, our managed land base. It's PCTs and plantations. There's a color here. Some of the plantations in green, those have been cleaned. Okay, the brown ones have not been cleaned. And then this color in orange, again, apologies for the colors, are PCTs. There was a lot of PCTs coming online, right? And we're really looking at that, saying, well, what's the right timing to harvest those stands? I'll talk about that again in a moment. But and then what do we do with these plantations that haven't been cleaned, with our low grade problems that we're having in the market? So there's there's full trees that are pulping there, right? So they haven't reached the size, and if we want to maintain some density in these that are going to produce larger saw material, what are we going to do in these forests, in these stand types? So just a little bit about this block of land. These are large blocks, and they were cut in the early 80s. through the 90s, our block sizes have been going down. And really, when we get into this forest, we're gonna have to think about the fact that these are relatively larger blocks, right, on the average. So, you know, from a regeneration perspective and sort of from a social perspective, what do we do there, and how do we think through that? Again, species composition, lots of fir in these stands. A lot of the PCTs are dominant to fir. Fir creates challenges, so got to think about that. Regeneration, you go into these stands, not a lot of light coming through the canopy, it's a closed canopy. You may find germinates, but not a lot of regeneration under these stands. How are we going to regenerate them? Lots to think about there. Density management, so if we want to maintain, it's just like hardwood, if we want to maintain a pea size that we've seen in the past in our mature natural forest, how are we going to do density management in all of this area to ensure that we're getting long logs with large top size? So this is a big density management issue. But then, if you commit to that, how do you get the timing right on such a large land base? And that's a precision forestry question as well, right? So, you know, without doing a whole bunch of groundwork, is there a precision forestry option to really think through the right timing on this? And then utilization. Should we be thinking differently about our utilization in these stands? We did invest in them, so what are we gonna do about utilization here with our markets? So lots to think about there. We're certainly doing lots of work on it. So just got a couple minutes here. I want to wrap up again, circle around back on precision and adaptation. The first thing here, you know, we think through our planning at a hierarchical, strategic, tactical, operational, right? That's the way we've sort of always done it. Broad objectives, block it, and even an operational plan. Well, precision, that says precision in the arrow there, it increases, that's not wasn't thought out very well. The precision goes up as you go down to operational, right? As you get closer to the operation, the precision goes up. Well, I'm glad I made it here for the end of the afternoon presentation, because, and then some of the work that we do LiDAR and other, there's no reason why the precision that exists, or at least a lot of the precision that exists when we do our operations today, can't be brought up front. I mean, maybe we got to rethink this, right? And maybe not flip it around, but flatten it out. A hierarchy. There's stuff, there's information that we would typically use at an operational level that we can swing around and swing up and use at a strategic level. So I don't know what you call it, whether it's strategic operational or strategic tactical, but I mean, that's what precision forestry is all about, I think, is using that more granular information, using the information that we have to make better strategic decisions, right? So that seems like a huge opportunity to me, is to kind of rethink how we're doing this planning. The regular hierarchy we may have the benefit of shifting it a bit, okay? The second thing that I'd say about precision, that's about improved outcomes, but on cost, I think a really interesting question to ask would be, you've got all these things going on in precision forestry. I think different companies are doing different things. We're doing some things, and everybody's got objectives for their organization. But like, if we stood back and we said, I hate to say a committee, but I won't say that. But if somebody stood back and said, well, what would be the precision forestry items you focus on to take $2 a cubic meter out on average across all our delivered wood, or $5, or whatever the number is, right? And you'd look at it and you'd say, okay, what are the items that you really focus on in New Brunswick to take some cost out of our wood? We're a small place. We're integrated heavily, and the product flows. It's just wild. We mapped product flows a couple of weeks ago. It's our forest just serves up the products, and we all cooperate to one extent or another to get that wood all delivered. And so we're heavily integrated. So the question is, well, what would you focus on? And my point here is that whatever the answers are, whatever you'd say, it should be cell towers, or it should be whatever it is, I just have to believe that the answer is even better if everyone did the same thing, or did something very similar. So if whatever the 3 or 4 things you focus on, if everybody teamed up and did it the same way, so that, because it's about information and technology, and information is easily transferred. That's what technology is all about. So is there a way to bring wood costs down for everybody if we answer those questions and then say, yeah, but it's even better if we all cooperate on it? I tend to believe that would be the case. So that's what I'm thinking about with precision. On adaptation, like risk and uncertainty, that doesn't sit well with government, right? I think that's probably why in the past that definition of adaptation has really changed to just kind of changing what we do rather than doing things that we're uncertain about and that may have some risk, but doing them anyway and learning from them. So, I wrote hedging risk here, but I don't think it's about hedging risk so much as just clearly identifying what the risks are and identifying what the consequences is if you're wrong, and just writing that down. It should be on our management plans. And you can defend that, right? You can defend, like I was thinking about the hardwood commercial thing. If there's a bump in our wood supply, if we try to apply that, someone might say, well, geez, that's risky because you really don't know what the response is. You haven't done it a lot in the past. Well, if you're explicitly stating the risk and you can measure it and you understand it and it's explicitly stated, that forces you into learning whether you're right or wrong. About reducing uncertainty, good questions. Research and that adaptive management, I think, reduces uncertainty. So, I'll just end with, we've got to ask good management questions, we've got to state them clearly, and we need to find very efficient ways to have them answered. That's what I'm thinking about when it comes to tying the set application and the precision forestry together. Otherwise, I heard people talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, they're just going to continue doing the same things. But really we can't, because we've got different forest problems. So anyway, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer some questions.
Any questions for Chris?
I'll ask a question.
Sure.
Just in that hierarchy that you have there, could you give us an example of what you're thinking about, say, moving from a strategic to a strategic operational, how that feedback?
Well, I keep going back to this sort of keep coming to mind because I'm most familiar with it right now. But I'll mention again work that Sean's done with commercial thinning operability. Right? So typically the way I think about commercial thinning operability is you define how much you're going to do. You have an idea at the strategic level about how much you're going to do and what the result of that will be. And then as you get down closer to operations, you're going to find that area, right? I think the way that using LiDAR to identify all of the area that is available sort of changes the question, right? Because you're saying, well, there's 10,000 hectares out there that we think would be available every year. What's the consequence of not doing that? And that's a good strategic question that if you leave stand timing and that type of decision down to an operational standpoint, I think you're going to miss something. So that's one example that I can think about.
Short term, what does our hardwood supply look like over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, right on Crownland?
Yeah.
On Crownland, we cut 1.9 million, and that's forecast to be maintained at that level. Yeah.
There's no adjustment coming, no downward adjustment.
Well, that's a strategic question that I'm not in charge of, but the forecast is good. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But it's a strategic question, but the forecast is good. Yeah.
Anyone else? Chris, on behalf of the group, I'm glad you were able to leave your duck blind here this morning. Thank you very much. Job well done.